You're not being ignored by powerful people. You're being used. And the reason this hurts is because deep down you can feel it. The sudden warmth when they need something. The silence when you don't. The way your value seems to expire the moment the task is done. You tell yourself you're imagining it, that you're overthinking, that this is just how networking works. It's not. This is the oldest power dynamic in human history, and Machiavelli warned about it long before LinkedIn, boardrooms, or social circles ever existed. Here's the brutal truth. Powerful people don't exploit everyone. They exploit those who don't understand power. And most people fall into this trap without realizing it. You show up early. You stay late. You offer help. You give loyalty. You give effort. And in return, you receive vague promises, delayed rewards, and endless maybe next time. Why? Because you've unknowingly positioned yourself in the lowest role of the hierarchy, the disposable asset. Machiavelli understood something most people still refuse to accept. Power does not run on fairness. It runs on advantage. And advantage is extracted wherever resistance is weakest. If you are always available, you are exploitable. If you are eager, you are predictable. If you are loyal without leverage, you are replaceable. This isn't because powerful people are evil. It's because power follows incentives, not intentions. The moment someone realizes they can take from you without consequence, the relationship is no longer mutual. It becomes functional, transactional, one-directional. And here's the most dangerous part. The more you try to prove your worth, the more you confirm your weakness. You think working harder will earn respect. You think patience will be rewarded. You think being good will eventually pay off. Machiavelli would call this a fatal misunderstanding of human need, nature. Because power doesn't ask, who deserves more? It asks, who can I afford to lose? And if the answer is you already know how the story ends. This is why powerful people often appear charming, appreciative, even generous, right up until the moment you are no longer useful. Then they vanish, or worse, they keep you close just enough to keep extracting value. You are not inside the circle, you are fueling it. Machiavelli wrote that men are quick to forget kindness, but never forget dependence. When someone depends on you emotionally or professionally, they feel threatened. When you depend on them, they feel safe. This is the imbalance that allows exploitation to thrive, and most people never correct it, because they're afraid. Afraid of losing access, afraid of confrontation, afraid that setting boundaries will make them irrelevant. But here's the paradox Machiavelli exposed. The moment you fear being used, you already are. The people who are never exploited share one trait. It's not dominance, it's not aggression, it's not status, it's leverage. They are useful, but not free, available, but not predictable, close, but not dependent. And until you understand how to shift from being consumed to being respected, every powerful person you meet will follow the same pattern with you. In the next part, we're going to expose the exact behavior that signals to powerful people that you are safe to use, and why they spot it instantly, even before you speak. Once you see this signal, you'll never unknowingly give it again. Before powerful people decide to use you, they test one thing: not your skill, not your intelligence, not your loyalty. They test your boundaries. And most people fail this test instantly, without a word being spoken. Machiavelli understood that power doesn't ask for permission. It probes, it nudges, it applies pressure just enough to see wax. Hat collapses. The moment you give more than is asked, respond faster than is required, or tolerate small disrespect, you send a silent message. You are safe to extract from. This is the signal almost everyone broadcasts without realizing it. You reply immediately. You agree automatically. You apologize unnecessarily. You explain yourself when no explanation was requested. Each of these behaviors seems polite, professional, even admirable. In reality, they reveal something dangerous. You fear loss of access. Power reads that fear like a scent in the air. Machiavelli warned that men are never destroyed by force alone, but by the concessions they make to avoid conflict. The powerful understand this instinctively. They don't need to dominate you openly. They let you overextend yourself voluntarily. And once you do, the hierarchy is set. Here's the brutal part. Power doesn't punish weakness. It relies on it. When you tolerate inconvenience without resistance, you become convenient. When you accept vague promises, you become patient. When you absorb pressure silently, you become reliable. Reliable does not mean respected. It means harvestable. This is why the most used people are often the most capable. They deliver without complaint. They fix problems quietly. They stabilize chaos without credit. And because they never push back, power never adjusts its behavior. Why would it? Machiavelli noted that people value what costs them something. What comes freely is taken lightly. When your time, effort, and loyalty cost nothing, they are treated accordingly. This is where most people panic and make things worse. They sense the imbalance and try to compensate emotionally. They become more agreeable, more helpful, more flexible. They believe this will restore goodwill. Instead, it accelerates extraction. Because power now knows two things. You won't resist, and you won't leave. This combination is lethal. The people who avoid this fate do something counterintuitive. They don't confront. They don't and they don't threaten. They pause. They slow responses. They narrow availability. They stop explaining themselves. Not dramatically, not aggressively, just enough to introduce friction. This friction is not punishment. It is information. It forces power to reassess the cost-benefit equation, to notice that access to you is no longer automatic. That effort must now be reciprocated. And here's the psychological twist Machiavelli understood deeply. The moment power has to think about losing you, your value increases. Not because you're rare, but because uncertainty has been introduced. Power hates uncertainty more than resistance. This is why boundaries are not about saying no. They are about controlling when, how, and at what cost you say yes. But there's a danger here. If you assert boundaries too early, you're dismissed. If you assert them too late, you're punished. Timing is everything. Which raises the next question, the one most people get wrong. When exactly do you stop giving freely, and how do you do it without triggering retaliation? Machiavelli had a precise answer to this, and it leads to the law that determines whether your boundaries create respect or invite replacement. That's what we uncover next. The moment you stop being easy, power notices. But here's what most people don't understand. Power doesn't react to boundaries the way normal people do. It doesn't get offended first. It gets curious. Machiavelli observed that when access is suddenly restricted, the powerful don't immediately punish. They reassess. They ask a silent question. Is this person still worth the effort? This is the real test. And this brings us to the turning point, the law that decides whether boundaries elevate you or erase you. You must stop giving value in the same way you gave it before. Not less value, different value. This is where people sabotage themselves. They finally realize they're being used, so they pull back completely. They disengage. They go cold. They withdraw emotionally and professionally, and power immediately replaces them. Why? Because sudden absence without repositioning looks like weakness, not leverage. Machiavelli warned against this exact mistake. He believed power respects evolution, not rebellion. If you remove value without reshaping perception, you're not asserting boundaries, you're signaling decline. The correct move is subtler. You stop doing what anyone could do. You continue doing what only you can do. This reframes the relationship. Instead of being a general utility, you become a specialist. Instead of being available, you become conditional. Instead of being reactive, you become selective. And this creates a psychological shift. Power begins to notice that access to you now requires intention, that your contribution is no longer automatic, that your presence changes outcomes but is no longer guaranteed. This is the moment respect can form. But it's also the moment power starts testing harder. Requests become slightly unreasonable, deadlines tighten, pressure increases. This is not punishment, it's calibration. Power is checking whether your boundaries are real or emotional. Most people crack here. They panic and over-deliver again, proving the boundary was temporary, or they confront aggressively, triggering defensiveness. Both outcomes confirm the same thing. You are still controllable. Machiavelli's solution was ruthless but effective. Never explain a boundary. Explanation invites negotiation. Negotiation invites erosion. You simply change behavior and let power adapt. You respond slower, not colder. You say less, not nothing. You decline selectively, not defiantly, and you do it consistently. Consistency is what makes power adjust. Because power does not argue with reality, it adapts to it. Over time, something critical happens. Power recalculates the exchange. It realizes extraction now comes with friction, that using you requires consideration, and that losing you would create inconvenience. This is the narrow path where leverage is born. But Machiavelli warned, leverage attracts attention. Once power recognizes you are no longer easily usable, it begins evaluating alternatives, rivals, replacements, contingencies. This is the most dangerous phase, because now the relationship can go one of two ways. You are elevated, or you are phased out. The difference comes down to one question. Do you solve a problem power cannot afford to lose right now? If yes, you rise. If no, you disappear. This is why Machiavelli emphasized timing above all else. Boundaries must be introduced when your value is already felt, but not yet secured elsewhere. Too early, and you're ignored. Too late, and you're punished. The people who master this phase don't seek fairness. They seek positioning. They make themselves just valuable enough to keep, and just scarce enough to respect. In the next part, we'll expose the most uncomfortable truth of all. Why powerful people often resent those they rely on, and how to neutralize that resentment before it turns into elimination. The moment power begins to rely on you, something dark appears beneath the surface. Resentment. This is the part nobody talks about. Not in networking books, not in leadership advice, but Machiavelli understood it clearly. The more a powerful person depends on you, the more threatened they feel by that dependence. Power hates debt, especially invisible debt. You see it in subtle ways. The tone shifts. Praise becomes rarer. Your ideas are accepted, but credited elsewhere. You're kept close, yet slightly diminished. This isn't accidental. Machiavelli warned that those who become too necessary often trigger fear rather than gratitude. Because power does not like to feel equalized. It prefers to give, not owe. And when power feels it owes you, even psychological, it looks for ways to rebalance the hierarchy. This is where many capable people are quietly destroyed. They mistake reliance for security. They think, they need me, I'm safe. They are not. This is the phase where power begins to rewrite the story internally, where it starts asking, how do I reduce this person's importance without losing what they provide? Sometimes it's subtle. Your role is reframed. Your contribution is minimized. Your visibility is controlled. Other times it's more direct. Pressure, criticism, sudden distance. None of it is personal. It is structural. Machiavelli believed that when dependence creates discomfort, power will always choose the path that restores dominance. So how do you survive this phase? You must do something counterintuitive. You must make power feel superior again, without reducing your value. This is a psychological maneuver, not a practical one. You let them lead publicly. You allow them to feel decisive. You frame your contributions as extensions of their vision. Not because it's true, but because it stabilizes the hierarchy. This is not submission, it is insulation. Because when power feels dominant, it stops feeling threatened. Machiavelli advised that the safest way to hold influence is to appear harmless while being essential. To let power feel taller, even as it leans on you. But there's a precise balance here. If you diminish yourself too much, you become background again. If you assert too much, you trigger elimination. The art is to separate credit from control. You let them take the credit. You quietly retain the control. This is how long-term operators survive. They don't compete for recognition. They compete for position. They understand that visibility invites rivals, while invisibility invites dependency. And dependency, managed correctly, is power. But Machiavelli also issued a warning here. Resentment never fully disappears. It can be softened, delayed, redirected, but never erased. Which means you must always assume this truth. Power is not loyal to people. It is loyal to outcomes. The moment you stop protecting the outcome, or someone else appears capable of doing it cheaper, you are vulnerable. This is why smart operators never rest on usefulness alone. They build something else quietly alongside it. Replaceability insurance. Not by threatening to leave, not by boasting about options, but by ensuring that removing them would create instability at the worst possible moment. Timing becomes your shield, and this leads us to the next law. The one that determines whether resentment fades or turns fatal. Because there is a precise moment when power decides whether to keep you close or cut you loose. And almost everyone misses it. There is always a moment when power decides. Not out loud, not formally, but internally. Machiavelli understood this moment better than most. It is the point where power asks itself a single, silent question. Is this person safer to keep or easier to remove? Everything you've done up to now leads here. This is the phase where many capable people disappear without warning. No confrontation, no explanation, just distance, silence, exclusion. They think it happened suddenly. It didn't. They missed the signal. Machiavelli wrote that power rarely strikes at its peak. It strikes when it feels prepared, when alternatives are in place, when the cost of removal feels low. And the mistake most people make is believing usefulness alone protects them. It doesn't. Usefulness attracts attention. Protection requires timing. This is where the smartest operators introduce what Machiavelli implicitly valued most: strategic indispensability at critical moments. Not constant importance, not daily relevance, but relevance when it matters most. Power remembers who saves it under pressure. If you are essential during calm periods, you are optional. If you are essential during crisis, you are remembered. This is why timing your value is more important than increasing it. You do not rush to fix every problem. You allow some friction. You let power feel the tension of uncertainty. Then, when stakes are highest, you act, and the contrast changes everything. Machiavelli believed that men judge importance not by effort, but by consequence. The person who resolves a crisis gains more protection than the one who prevents 10 inconveniences. This is why overhelping is dangerous. It flattens perception. It makes your contribution feel routine. Routine is replaceable. Crisis is not. But here's the danger. If you step in too visibly during crisis, you absorb blame as well as credit. Power loves solutions, but hates shared risk. So you must operate indirectly. You guide decisions without owning them publicly. You stabilize outcomes without standing at the center. You make power feel victorious while knowing the truth quietly. This is the final transformation, from asset to stabilizer. And stabilizers are protected. However, Machiavelli warned that even stabilizers are not immortal, which is why the final mistake must be avoided at all costs. The mistake of believing protection is permanent, because power never stops calculating, and once stability returns, the question will rise again. Do we still need this person? Which means survival requires one last discipline, one most people resist instinctively: knowing when to step back. And that brings us to the final part, the law that decides whether your influence fades quietly or solidifies permanently. The most dangerous moment in any power relationship is after success. When the crisis is resolved, when stability returns, when things feel calm again, this is where people relax and get erased. Machiavelli warned that power becomes most ruthless when it no longer feels pressure, because calm gives it time to calculate, to audit, to reduce costs. And the first cost power looks to cut is dependency. If you remain too visible after the storm, you become a reminder of vulnerability, a witness to weakness, a symbol of reliance. Power does not like symbols. It didn't choose. This is why the smartest operators do something that looks irrational to outsiders. They step back at the peak, not dramatically, not emotionally, quietly. They reduce visibility just enough to let power feel autonomous again. They allow leaders to reclaim the narrative, to feel in control, to believe stability is self-sustaining. This is not retreat, it is timing. Machiavelli understood that those who linger after usefulness invite suspicion, but those who withdraw strategically create respect. Because absence after impact creates a powerful illusion that you are not clinging, that you are not dependent, that you are not desperate for position. This illusion protects you. Power begins to see you differently, not as a fixture to be managed, but as a variable to be preserved. But most people cannot do this. Their ego wants recognition. Their fear wants reassurance. Their attachment wants permanence. So they stay. They over-contribute. They hover. And power begins to plan around them. Machiavelli wrote that men rarely destroy those who leave on their own terms, but they often destroy those who stay too close for too long. This is the subtle discipline of strategic distance. You don't disappear. You become lighter, less central, less obvious, yet still reachable. This forces power to remember your value rather than grow accustomed to it. And something interesting happens. When power senses that you are not chasing position, it stops feeling the need to defend against you. Suspicion lowers, resentment cools, and your presence becomes welcome again. This cycle, engagement, impact, withdrawal, is what keeps influence alive over time. It is the opposite of how most people behave. They either overstay or vanish completely. Both are mistakes. Machiavelli's operators understood rhythm. Presence had weight because it was not constant. And this rhythm leads to the final realization, the one that separates people who are used once from those who remain relevant across many circles. Because real power is not about holding one position, it's about being portable, And that brings us to the final part, the principle that decides whether you will always be reacting to power or calmly navigating it wherever it exists. The people who are never used by power all share one trait. They are not anchored. Machiavelli never trusted permanence. He trusted positioning. He understood that the moment you tie your identity, security, or self-worth to one source of power, you become manageable. And manageable people are always exploited. This final law is the one most people resist because it requires killing the last illusion. Law 7. Never belong to power. Learn to move through it. Power respects mobility more than loyalty. The most dangerous person in any hierarchy is not the rebel. It's the one who can leave without noise, without bitterness, without loss of identity. Why? Because power cannot threaten someone who does not depend on it. Most people chase proximity. They want a seat, a title, recognition. They want to be inside. And the moment they feel inside, they stop observing. They stop adapting. They stop protecting themselves. Machiavelli would call this intellectual death. Because power is never static. It shifts, it decays, it betrays. And those who attach themselves emotionally are the first casualties when the structure changes. The people who survive long-term treat power like terrain, not shelter. They move through it, they read it, they exploit its blind spots, and when the ground shifts, they move again. This is why they're never shocked by exclusion, never desperate for access, never broken by loss of favor. They expected it, and because they expected it, they prepared for it. They built identity outside the hierarchy. They built competence that travels. They built relationships that don't collapse when one door closes. So when power tries to use them, it feels resistance, not confrontation, but independence. And power respects independence more than obedience. This is the final psychological reversal. You stop asking, how do I stay useful? You start asking, what version of me cannot be exploited? That version is calm, detached, self-directed, not arrogant, not aggressive, just unavailable for manipulation. Machiavelli believed that men fear losing control more than they desire dominance. When power senses it cannot fully control you, it treats you differently, more carefully, more respectfully. Not because it likes you, because it has to. And this is the true end of being used. Not confrontation, not revenge, not exposure, but irrelevance to exploitation. You become someone who can contribute without being consumed, who can engage without being trapped, who can walk away without collapse. Once you reach this state, something profound changes. Power no longer feels intimidating. It feels readable, predictable, limited. You stop feeling small around it. And that is the moment Machiavelli was really pointing toward. Not domination over others, but mastery over your position within human nature. Because the ones who are never used are the ones who were never owned.